lead with this. You probably didn't know I was going to, but you wrote a piece for Warchant.com, as you're known to do. And I read it, and I liked it because I think it's what's on the mind of every college football fan everywhere. And I think it's also on the mind of every Florida State fan. I think it's a pressing, just an omnipresent sort of thought that people are having right now, which is that we really need this thing to work. The House settlement, that we need a czar of college football. We need a restriction on the monies being spent, because ultimately very few teams would ever be able to compete with a select group of teams, the oil money teams like Texas, the legendary alumni base of a Notre Dame or something like that goes back over 100 years. So you wrote about this because you went over to Amelia Island. Tough gig.
It was.
And you got to talk to a lot of administrators about their thoughts regarding, is this going to work? And their response to you, and I'm going to let you talk here more on this in a second, was basically like, well, it's really about enforcement. It's really about whether or not you're going to be able to enforce the things that we all know are necessary for college football to make some sense moving forward, right?
Yeah, because the whole thing really over the last year since the House settlement has really kind of stepped up and become the big topic, the big talking point in college athletics in the future and trying to figure out how to solve these issues. You know, the big question is, okay, this sounds good that there'll be a salary cap and $20.5 million a year. If schools opt into revenue sharing, that's the most they'll be able to give their players. So in a school like Florida State, where football's probably going to get 85% of the money, you're talking about maybe a salary of $17 million or so to go to the student athletes, go to the football players. The rest would go to some of the other sports. But is that going to – that's only like a salve. That's only a solution if everybody plays by the same rules. And the question that I have for a lot of people over at Amelia Island, and I've been trying to get to the bottom to, because the FSU people you talk to, especially on the record, have been very confident that this is going to work, that there is going to be a salary cap, and then that's going to change everything, and everybody's going to be playing by the same rules. Now, you might have the old $1,000 handshakes. You may have, a bag shows up at $50,000, whatever.
It oddly creates the old system.
Right. But people would be fine with the old system.
Yes, they would.
The problem is now where it's legal, where at least there's no enforcement. Those schools you mentioned, the Texas schools primarily, they're going to play a completely different sport than everybody else. And we're seeing it. It's no coincidence that Texas Tech has done what they've done in the portal. They did what they did in men's basketball. They're doing what they did in softball, where they're going to have $1 million pitcher come into Tallahassee this week. This is not, I think the big fear from FSU fans for the last several years and Clemson fans has been the revenue gap. Well, these SEC schools have so much more money and they're going to be getting all this money from TV. The Texas schools don't give a damn. SMU joined the ACC without the media revenue.
Didn't care
we
about
don't need it.
No, we're multi-billionaires everywhere.
Just let us in the league.
Just let us in the league so we have a way to the playoff.
We'll take care of everything else.
Right.
And now we're seeing that now with the restrictions taken away, those schools now are going crazy. And so the only way, and this isn't just a Florida State issue, I think it's probably an issue for 95% of the schools in the country. If there isn't some way to kind of get the genie somewhat back in the bottle, how's anybody going to compete if you don't have those resources? And so, I thought the news last night from Ross Dellinger and Pete Thamel that they're already down the road. These Power 4 commissioners, we laughed at Jim Phillips last week for his conversations with the other Power 3 commissioners, but they are doing some work, and they've already been working on this idea of having a commission that's totally separate from the NCAA that oversees college athletics, and there will be a commissioner, czar type person, CEO, who will have pretty much autonomy when it comes to leveling punishments, and not just the punishments we've always heard about. You get like a bowl ban, or you might lose. They're talking about like, no, you're done. You're out of this league, or you're not playing any of these teams anymore. You're going to, I guess one of the comparisons, I think Dellinger or one of them quoted an AD at another school, and they talked about like Bounty Gate with the Saints. Like, no, your head coach is done for a year.
Yeah.
Like that's that kind of penalties. Well, if that happens, maybe we have a chance.
The problem is, as much as we'd all like to see this work, and there has to be some semblance of parameters put in place that guides the sport. Multi-billion-dollar sport with no direction is a bad thing and really mind-blowing. But anyhow, the problem with it is, will it hold up to the multitude of lawsuits that are going to occur moving forward, because what'll happen is the athletes will say, no, you're putting a cap on my money. You're restricting what's possible for me. This is what got you in trouble the first go around. You've lost in every one of these cases in the courts. And now you're going to lose again if I bring this to the courts, is what they're going to say.
Right. And I thought Andy Staples, with part of the On3 Network, had a great column last night. People can read it. It's on the, you'll see it at warchant.com or go to On3, talking about Tennessee specifically, because Tennessee and like 20 other states have already passed laws that basically forbid any organization from telling their schools what they can and can't pay their student athletes.
Right.
So that is going to be a conflict. And, you know, listen, but he also had a quote from Danny White, the AD at Tennessee, basically saying, look, we want to be part of the solution. Like, they want to work through this.
I don't buy it.
Well, I will say this, man. I don't know that those schools can compete. I don't even know if some of those schools can compete with the money we're going to be talking about from these Texas schools. Now, you know, we'll see, but I do think there's an interest in at least getting it back to where it used to be, to where if you wanted to cheat, you could cheat, but on a smaller level. Like, I don't think I was talking to somebody at FSU the other day about this. Is it going to go back to the so-and-so got a car, so-and-so's mom got a job, they got a house? Yes, it's probably going to go back to that, but at least there it's not wide out in the open, and you don't have this bidding process for players. Because what's happening now is players come on visits, and this isn't a revelation, you certainly know it. Players come on visits, and then they leave, and then they'll call and say, hey, well, so-and-so's offering me this, and so-and-so's offering me that, and there's really no way to verify it. So you get this auction process going, and it's just ridiculous. It's not sustainable. So I think there are a lot of schools and a lot of leaders who do want to find some sort of solution.
I'll be very interested, and I'm also interested in the timeline that something like this happens, because it feels like we're sitting here, it's in perpetuity. I mean, like, we're waiting and waiting. They're already well past the original date, well past the date, the end of April. Now we're like approaching late May. We'll see. I mean,
well, this is all, and all of those hypotheticals are only if Judge Wilkin approves the settlement, right? Which is still up in the air. So I mean, there's a needle that they're trying to thread here, but at least I think there's a sliver of hope. Because here's my thing, man. As you sit there and ponder it, and I know you've kind of gone to some dark places, pondering the future about Florida State athletics. I have. If there's not something like that on the horizon, it's like, well, man, what are schools like Florida State? And when I say schools like Florida State, I mean 90% of the schools, 90 to 95% of schools. What are they going to do? Like, what can you do to compete at that level?
They'll get their ass beat when they face schools that are capable of unlimited spending on a roster, which is what Texas is doing now. And you don't begrudge Texas because they can, in the same way that Ohio State did just a year ago, and there are no rules against it. So they're not violating any rules. It's just not good for the sport. Right. And we've talked about that at length. And I said last year, when the ratings came out for the first ever expanded college football playoff, the big ballyhoo in the leads for all of those stories were that they were record setting. And I said, well, don't get used to that, because this is a novel thing that we're doing here. And I promise you, the average college football fan is angrier now than they've ever been at the sport. And they're only going to get angrier.
And if it's the same 8 schools,
it's going to be. Yeah. And soon you'll be irrelevant, and you'll stop spending your Saturdays watching your team get their head kicked in because they can't get the better players. They have no shot at it. Now, the retort is, well, they could. They're now in a position to bid. Yet, not ultimately. They're not going to outbid Texas, Texas Tech, the oil money schools that you're talking about. They're not going to bid certain other legacy schools like a Notre Dame. They're not going to be able to. It's bad for the sport. Unlimited free agency is also bad for everybody.
Well, and that's the thing. And when Aslan and I were over there at Amelia Island, grinding away, guys,
tough times.
One of the things we talked about was, there is a scenario where if something like this happens, if there is real enforcement and there is a salary cap, and at least the genie, we can get a couple legs and maybe an arm back in the bottle. The whole genie shot, we just get part of the genie back in the bottle. And they changed the portal structure where it's only one window a year as opposed to two windows. All right, man. Okay, yeah. Like, you can live with that here. Because I think that other piece is huge. That portal piece is huge, because if you go to one portal window and it's only after the spring, because I guess the AFCA Coaches Association originally said they recommended January. I think most of the conferences now are saying, January is okay, but let's look at April or May, because if you do it at the end of the spring,
which I think is great.
Oh, it makes 100 times more sense.
If I'm working my ass off to win a starting job for a program in the spring and I don't get what I wanted and I'm frustrated and I'm buried on the depth chart, I got this opportunity to leave now at the end of spring and get somewhere by fall and compete there. That's perfect. You're still finishing out your season where we have it now at the end of these years. Yeah. It's crazy how quickly you can't even prep for your playoff matchup. You literally have to go sit down and talk to a player before your playoff game, who, by the way, is in a position to hold you hostage, which is what allegedly occurred with Tennessee before the Ohio State game. Yeah. And their quarterback, it was like, I don't know, guys.
I kind of like the idea of making another million.
Double my salary, please, before the big game.
Yeah. And that part of it. And then also I think it would just by nature of other schools' interest in your players would be a little bit reduced because they know they wouldn't have them for spring. So, if that guy does go in the portal, then there'll probably be opportunities for him. But you probably won't be seeing quite as much poaching because those other schools won't feel like they can go get a player and have them all spring and then summer to get ready for the fall. They'll only have them for a few months. So they're not going to be as eager to go out and just poach all your players. So I think from that standpoint, if you got these two things done, man, I really feel like there's a good path for college sports to kind of get back to something like we want.